Hi everybody, is this on?
Another microphone?
Microphone check.
Hi, okay, yeah, there we go. Thank you everyone for coming here, first of all, for bringing your presence to this beautiful gathering and event. So my background is professional athlete, snowboarder, and I am a Protector Winters athlete as well, and I'm really proud to be so. And we're here at the Be Inspired event. What does inspired really mean? To me, inspired means to be in spirit. And the easiest way I've figured out to be in spirit is the breath. So I want to invite everybody to take a second to breathe together. Should we do that? Yeah. Who's down? Yeah. You! Okay, so breathing in and out of the nose helps relax. So let's do that. Let's take a deep breath together in through the nose and out of the nose. In, out. One more. In, out. Thank you. It doesn't only connect you to your own spirit, it connects you to everybody's spirit, because there's no separation, there's no walls, we're all one. And I would like to introduce Jake Black, my good friend from Protector Winters.
All right, so you guys didn't know this, but I'm actually here to warm up for the band. So I've never played much, but get ready. I'm just kidding. But so how many of you guys are getting fired up for all the snow out here? All right, how many of you guys have heard of Protect Our Winters before? We've got a good chunk here. Sweet. Well, so I'm here not only because the great folks at B Labs and because our great partners at Taos are here, but because I want to talk to you guys about climate change and how it's impacting everything that we're doing. And so POW is this really unique organization. It's not just because we get to work with all these amazing brands and athletes and partners and resorts like Taos, but because we have this incredible community of people all over the world who eat, drink, and breathe this passion for playing outside. And so we want to be this unified voice that brings everybody together. And it's much more than sport. It's about being something bigger than yourselves and figuring out how to make the world a better place. So I want to start by bringing a quote in from President Obama, and he said, "We are the first generation that can see the effects of climate change, but we're the last generation that can do something about it." And so we may not individually be who created this problem, but if we come together, we can solve it, and we already know how to. So that's what I'm going to talk more about, what we can do about it. But before we get too deep, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Keystone, Colorado. I was one of 3 sons to a couple of ski bums, and my dad actually is here. He ski bummed his way down to Taos. Yeah. So I grew up in Keystone, Colorado, and it was like, since I could walk, I was skiing. And when I was 7 years old, I guess I decided that I wanted to snowboard. And so my parents figured out how to do it, because they didn't really make the gear at that time. And they, got this sweet custom board, and I've got my Sorels there with my ski boot liners, and you can see my fashion is still impeccable. I have a Ninja Turtles fanny pack on there, so style's always been my forte. But this day, when I was 7 years old, when I learned to snowboard, really changed my life for the better. And for the majority of my life, I actually was able to compete professionally in halfpipe and slopestyle events with the best of them, and it was a lot of fun. But with that, I learned so many lessons on how to work hard and how to set goals and follow through. And I was introduced to so many incredible people. And along the way, I started to notice that there was really big changes around the world. And a lot of them had to do with our climate. So, to show you a little more, last winter I had the great fortune of going to Chamonix, France, which is just it's a ski mecca. It's amazing. The Alps there, they're beautiful and terrifying at the same time because they're such big peaks. And so this is actually called the Mer de Glace Glacier. And you come down here, this train station on the side, you actually still come down and hike up to this train to get back into town. This photo is from about 100 years ago. And this is the same glacier today. So 100 years later, this is what we ski down to get down there, and then you actually have to climb these staircases you can't see, and every year they're having to add stairs because it's melting more and more and more. And so this is just one example of how the climate is really negatively being impacted. Well, so what is impacting this climate? It's our greenhouse gas emissions. Humans are the cause, and we're burning fossil fuels. It's a direct correlation. And so what you can see is as we continue to burn more gas, we're continuing to put more of these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And more heat is getting trapped in our Arctic. Ice is melting, our sea levels are rising, we're having longer droughts, more extreme weather patterns. It's a vicious cycle that will continue to go on and on and on. And according to the IPCC, which is the International Panel on Climate Change, they just came out last fall and said if we don't take action, dramatic action by 2030, we will see irreversible damage to the planet. And in many ways, if we don't act on climate, all other problems become worse. So this problem is extremely big, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed and really down on yourself because it's such a global issue. But I'm here to show you that there's ways that we can get involved, and that's where POW really wants to speak up. At POW, it's our mission to turn everybody that loves the outdoors into effective climate advocates. And we believe that we can engage with a percentage of this community in key locations to influence and add to the environmental movement to influence systemic political solutions. So if you guys come away with anything, I'm going to get into a little more of the policy areas and things that we focus on, but if you take anything away from this presentation, take away this slide. Our vision is we want to increase renewables and decrease carbon. How are we going to get there? It's action over apathy. We can't wait till everything's perfect and every solution's figured out. We have to act now and figure it out along the way. How do you get from the bottom of here to the top of the mountain? It's one step at a time. It's never going to be a jump to the top. We have to act. So there's 4 main areas that we focus on with Protect Our Winners, and I'm going to dive into a little bit of what's going on, where we see opportunities, and how the communities can get involved. Because it's going to take everybody. And so our first of 4 is investing in a renewable energy economy. So a couple of fun facts here. Solar has actually dropped 99% in cost in the last 40 years. It's way beyond projections. Right now, solar and wind, yeah, it is good. And already, so even under the current administration, large-scale solar and wind turbines cost less than building any new nuclear, coal, or natural gas facilities today. So that's, with anything that's happening right now, it's already cheaper. Along that, the wind and solar are 2 of the largest job sectors growing in the country, and we already have almost 3 times as many people working in renewables than we do in the fossil fuel industries. And that's with a fraction of the market. It's under 20% of the US is really being powered by renewables. Yet it's already out, it's a huge economic boost. So with Protect Our Winners, I want to talk about how these local changes can impact national and bigger solutions. So many of our athletes have gone to their own communities and gone to their town council meetings and said, hey, we want our town to go 100% renewable. It's really easy to go to a town council meeting. And in a couple examples, we had Park City, Breckenridge, and Truckee, that we had several of our ambassadors, and some of them are going to speak after today, go and say that they wanted the 100% renewable. The town passed the pledge, and now they're figuring out how to go 100% in the next 20 to 30 years. Well, that little amount of pressure helped influence a bigger solution. So Xcel Energy, which is one of the providers here in New Mexico, and one of the biggest providers in Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and it's 8 states total, has actually pledged that they will go carbon-free by 2050. This just happened a couple of months ago. It's a huge push from a public utility commission, an actual monopoly, that's just decided this is where we need to go. 1, because it's cheaper, but 2, because this is what our people want, and it's how we're gonna sustain and stay in business. So this is a huge win that was influenced by localized action. The next thing that we work on is putting a price on carbon. So this one gets a little bit confusing, and a lot of people go, well, what do you mean? What is that? And I like to use an analogy of, let's say you had a paper mill, and you had a bunch of pulp and waste that came from it, and you had a stream next door, and so you just decided, rather than managing it, you just dumped it out into the stream. Well, that's going to negatively impact the flora and fauna and the ecosystems, and you're going to get fined for it, because that's not acceptable. We have, the Clean Water Act is actually a perfect example for that. But we don't have the same type of regulation when it comes to carbon and greenhouse gases. Right now, we're just burning fuels and they go into the atmosphere and no one has to pay for these externalities. Yet, they're negatively impacting everybody. So we're trying to educate on how there's many ways to do this. I wouldn't say there's in climate in general, I don't believe that there's a silver bullet solution. I think it's going to take a silver buckshot to actually solve this. And so it's how can we figure out what are the solutions and get these policies into place so that we can incentivize and increase renewables. Because if you can combine a carbon pricing program with investing in renewables, it has a dramatic shift in how our economies are run. And on that, there's about 6 states already working on policies, and there is a bipartisan act going through. This is still in the works, it's really young, but they are talking on both sides of the aisle on how we can get this on a federal level. So this is a real solution. The third thing that we work on is innovating transportation. So how can we electrify one system? And I say that in the sense of right now our homes are powered by one system and our vehicles are driven by another. That means we have to innovate in 2 different worlds. Or we can electrify our transportation system and we only have to innovate and transition one type of energy. It's a fantastic way to simplify how we can do this. Did you guys, So did you guys know there's an electric Subaru? Exactly, and it's because our states don't have the incentives to bring them in right now. But it does exist, it's pretty sweet. To add to this, right now, transportation is our largest emission sector in the US. It has recently bypassed our power sector because certain fossil fuel plants are being shut down, our efficiencies in buildings are getting better, but we're driving more and more and more, and actually 83% of that metric right there is from our passenger vehicles and trucks. So 83% of our transportation emissions come from everything that we drive around most of the time. And so with that, with our ambassadors and with our partners and brands, what we're doing is speaking up again in local issues. They're writing op-eds to their communities saying how carbon pricing and electric vehicles will actually help their communities. We've had ski resorts like Taos and Arapahoe Basin speak up and say at zero emission and low emission vehicle standards, that's one of the policies, they're called ZEV and LEV standards, speak up and say this is good for our business because it helps keep our business alive. And in the end, I have another win to share. In Colorado, our new governor, just like the governor here in New Mexico, is a climate champion. And they are speaking up in his first executive order he just used to pass to say we're going to bring close to 1 million electric vehicles into the state by 2030. It's a huge win. Yes. And so this is close to, like California standards, and that way we can bring these in and it's going to help incentivize people to buy these cars and innovate in this system. And the fourth and final area we focus on is protecting public lands. And specifically, it's how do you elevate the significance of the climate narrative when it comes to public lands? Because more often than not, our issues right now on public lands have a lot to do with our issues with climate change. And I say that as, right now, Bears Ears and Grand Escalantes, we've been shrinking these parks and opening drilling into the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Well, we're doing this in public lands that all of us own, but yet they're selling them for leases so that we can drill. When we have cheaper, smarter technologies, we could put in other places that we may not want to play. And not to say, there's no perfect solution, but it doesn't make sense that we're doing this when we already have better technologies we can put elsewhere. All right. And so already, if our emissions from public lands were considered a country, they're our 5th biggest emitters in the world, and that's just within the US. So in a 2018 USGS study, this comes out every 4 years, 23.7% of emissions in the US come from public lands. That's a massive amount, and that's on our land. It's not some individual businesses, it's our land. But yet we're still, on a federal level, having a lot of setbacks. Right now, the US is the only country in the world that is not signed on to the Paris Climate Accord. For a little while, Nicaragua was unwilling to, and some of the Middle Eastern countries, they've changed and they've signed on. We have pulled ourselves away from the table, which really is a disservice to ourselves. Fortunately, we do have state legislators that are speaking up. Nevada, in a recent executive order, I believe it was one of her first executive orders, signed on to the Climate Alliance, which means New Mexico, will sign on to commit to the Paris Agreement. So we have states that are doing this, yes. And so we need more of them. And so I throw this in here as this is one of my shots from snowboarding. And I use it actually more as a symbol because this picture probably took like 50 tries. And I remember because I kept falling or I'd miss something or it would, land on my butt or hit my face or something. But every time it wasn't that it was the end, it was just another attempt. And so every time I'd visualize what went on, try and figure out how to fix it, hike back up and try it again. And that's the same ethos we need to take when we're acting in any activism. We have to be able to get back up, brush ourselves off, and go again. And I love this quote. Do you guys know Charles Bukowski at all? Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes from him is, "What matters most is how we walk through the fire." I think this is a perfect example. So at Protect Our Winners, what we have done is we have gotten into the trenches when it comes to politics. And we have created what's called the Protect Our Winners Action Fund, which is a 501c4. So POW is a 501c3, this is a 501c4. And what this allows us to do is speak up when it comes to elections. So we, this last fall, made a ballot guidebook which showed who were the climate champions and how different policies impact climate. And this was a huge way to engage the community in figuring out what are the places that we can all speak up and use our voices, because our votes really do matter. Yeah, and every day they matter. And so I throw this in there, and I think everyone's going to talk a little more about it as well, but often we get finger pointed at and saying, well, this is great, but you just talked about flying to France, and you probably have a pretty large carbon footprint yourself. Why should I listen to you? You're pretty hypocritical. Well, I want to kind of frame the picture a little bit differently. So I calculated how much my trip to France, the carbon footprint of my trip was, and I'm just going to call it 2 metric tons up here. Let's say everybody in the room here came with me and we all offset our 2 metric tons. So we've got, let's just call it 1,000 metric tons we've offset. That's great. There's programs that are great that you can, for regenerative agriculture, reforestation, you can help do these things and they're fantastic. But we did nothing in that action to impact the 10 average coal plants in the US, which emit 20 million metric tons every year. So every year we have 20 million, and there's way more than 10 coal plants. This is a massive amount of carbon that's being put into the atmosphere that we're instead, what I often think happens within the environmental movement is we point at each other because we don't find perfection. And so we say, well, you're not totally right, and so I'm against you now, but we're on the same side. And so rather than pointing fingers and saying, your individual footprint's the problem, it's how can we work together to speak up on these larger problems. And the fortunate part of that is that economics are also on our side. So not only do we have policies in place, we have technologies that are available, but the outdoor recreation economy spends $887 billion a year on skiing, snowboarding, fishing, biking, running, going to national parks. I mean, anything you guys can imagine is included into this, and there's only 2 industries that are bigger. They both have to do with healthcare, and fossil fuels are about 1/3 of our spending every year compared to the outdoor recreation. But one of them is being far further represented than the outdoor recreation economy, and I bet you can guess which one. To add to that, there's 7.6 million jobs in the outdoor industry. It's a massive, massive part of our economy. Still, there's 150 representatives today in 2019 that absolutely deny climate change exists. And this is under 4 pretenses. They either think it's a hoax, they believe the climate's always changing and that this is just a cycle, the science isn't settled, or that humans are not the cause of climate change, even though overwhelming evidence shows all 4 of those things are a farce. So I love this comic, actually, because in the end, even if all of this science is malarkey, every single thing that I just talked about doing builds a better world. So, solving climate is actually a byproduct of so much innovation and inspiration. We create more resilient communities. We improve human health care. We really help everybody. And oh, by the way, it reduces our carbon footprint. It's an incredible byproduct to have. So this is where, as I started with it, in a sense, I like to say I've turned my passion into purpose, and I want you guys all to join us as well and turn your passion into purpose. And anybody can be a climate advocate. You don't have to be a politician or a scientist. If you care at all, that's all that you need to do. You just need to find your lever and speak up about it. So what can you do? Here's just a list of a couple things. Voting is obviously an incredible part of what you can do. Go to a protest, show up to your town council meetings, change building codes, question the status quo within your own family and business. Just challenge to make yourself better, and that's B Corp really enables that ethos. And this is just how we can propel ourselves to a better future. So I have something to ask of you guys. Right now, I need you guys to pull your phones out and text 52886 and write "love snow" in one word to this number. And what this will do, it's really easy, it will ask you a couple of questions, and it will have you write a letter to your state representative, because we are now in the 116th Congress in the US, and we want our representatives to know that we care about warming winters. So there's actually a pre-written letter that you can either send, or you can update it to whatever messaging that you want to tell your representative. I can write and say, "I'm Jake, and I really care about warming winters, and I need you to act on this, or we're gonna have bigger issues to deal with." It's really easy, and communicating with your representatives is one of the biggest ways they know what you care about. And we need to make sure that climate becomes one of our top priorities. So I have one final thing to end with, and then we can take some questions, but what I like to say about acting on climate change is, if you drive, so let's say you're driving, and you're going the wrong way, and you're looking at your map, and you go, "I'm going the wrong direction," but you slow down, you're still going the wrong way. You have to turn around. When it comes to acting on climate change, we can't just slow down what we're doing. It would just still lead us to this inevitable problem. We need to turn around, and we know how to do it. We just need to come together. So thank you guys so much, and yeah, any questions?